Welcome back to another episode. Now I'm really glad that you're tuning in because once again we have a very special and a very interesting episode. Today we're looking at one of the great kings of history, a man known for his bravery, his exceptional leadership, and his massive conquest in the ancient world. If you haven't guessed it, if you haven't seen the title, today we're talking about none other than Alexander the Great. If you're new here, I'm Cosden, this is Vlogs on Knowledge, and every single week it is absolutely awesome. If you're not subscribed, I really think that you should be because every single week we have a brand new episode about history. Make sure to click the subscribe button, make sure to hit the notification bell, join Team Knowledge, and be notified whenever I release a new video. So with that being said, well, let's get to it. I'm really glad to be able to make this video today for you guys because Alexander the Great has always been a man that was of interest to me. I've always wanted to know about his story, his conquest, why people are so crazy about him, and today I get to do just that. I mean, we always hear stories about Alexander the Great, how good of a person he was, how good of a general he was, how many battles he won, how many territories he conquered, and when you hear stories like that, it kind of makes you curious. So to put my curiosity to rest and to give you guys an awesome video, I thought this week was going to be the week that I cover Alexander the Great. We're going to look at his story, his empire, himself as a person, his conquest, and by the end of this video, you'll know everything that you need to know about Alexander the Great. But as always, before we continue, let's put all this in historical context and get some background. Alexander was born in the year 356 BC in ancient Greece, and ancient Greece at the time was in a period that we now call the classical period of Greece. That's when you had Greek gods, you had Greek temples, you had philosophy, and you had the city-state. And in fact, I do have a whole video on ancient Greece. If you want to check that out, it does have a lot of information as to how Greece was at the time. Alexander was born to royalty. He was the son of King Philip II of Macedon. And from an early age, the king had Alexander train in physical combat and educated him in the disciplines of reading, writing, history, and philosophy. This was done because the king wanted his successor, right, the firstborn son, the future king, to be well educated and well prepared for the difficult job of being a king, because being a king was not going to be an easy task. You had to be well prepared. From the age of 13 years old, Alexander was tutored at the request of the king by the great philosopher Aristotle. The king hired Aristotle to be a private tutor to Alexander, and Aristotle taught the young teenager about philosophy, something that would influence Alexander in his conquest to come. Alexander also really loved the great heroes of ancient Greece. People like Achilles and Hercules were prime influences to Alexander. This is believed to be because Aristotle taught Alexander about Homer's Iliad, and for those who don't know, Homer's Iliad is a poem that has many stories, including the stories of Achilles, the story of Hercules, and even the Battle of Thermopylae. From young, Alexander believed that he was going to become a great man capable of doing great things, so much so that he even declared himself the son of Zeus, effectively making himself a demigod. This belief in divinity is said to have come from his mother, who told him that he was born of a virgin birth, enabled by the Greek god Zeus. And I mean, I don't know about you, but if my mother were to tell me that, hey, Darius, you're born of a virgin birth, and your dad is the Greek god Zeus, like, I would believe it. I would want to believe that because, come on, like, being the son of Zeus, that would be a pretty cool thing. And because of that, he was now able, well, at least in his head, to link his family's blood with that of Achilles and Hercules, and he began to model his own behavior according to theirs. At the age of 18 years old, he had his first military experience. He was in charge of a small division of his father's army and helped his father fight a battle. His division is believed to have played a key role in the battle, effectively turning the war in their favor. The king then won the war, and he became the unified ruler of the city-states. Unfortunately, Alexander's father, the king, was assassinated not too long after, and the throne was now left to Alexander. His father now being dead and himself having inherited a very experienced army, Alexander took on a mission that had been itching the Greeks for many years. That mission? Invading Persia. It's no secret that Persia and Greece have a very tense history. I mean, Persia did try to invade Greece twice, and they failed both times. In fact, those two invasions are the inspiration for the movie 300 that came out a couple of years ago. For those that haven't seen the movie, I think that you should because it's a very interesting movie. There's a lot of action and it's definitely a good watch. Alexander wanted to conquer the Persians once and for all because the Persians were in their way to Asia. Like, there was no way that the Greeks could go to Asia as long as the Persians were there. If they wanted to go to Asia, they had to take down the Persians. With a big army of over 30,000 infantry and 5,000 cavalry, Alexander in the year 334 BC entered Persia and began his conquests. He invaded, he sacked, he won, and he took over city after city in Persia, expanding his empire very quickly in the process. He defeated many Persian armies, he made the king flee multiple times, and he renamed a lot of the cities after his name because he wanted to solidify his reputation of being a demigod. Because if you have a lot of cities that are named after you, people might accept that you're a demigod because they see your power, they see your influence, they see you taking over city after city. They might very well accept that you're a demigod. Now here's where we get to see Aristotle's influences being played out. Alexander, he never imposed Greek culture, nor did he impose Greek ideologies on any territory or city that he conquered. This was something that would eventually be part of his reputation. He was very kind and he was very respectful to the people after he had conquered them. He was perfectly okay with them keeping their own gods, keeping their own culture, as long as they kept the food supply chain open to feed his troops, something that other generals were not thinking about. Alexander recognized the value in keeping your troops happy and keeping your troops fed. If your troops are not happy and if they're not fed, they're not going to fight well for you. You're going to lose battles. And of course, Alexander, he wanted to win battles. He did not want to lose battles. So he absolutely made sure that his troops were happy and that his troops were fed. Now, don't get me wrong. That's not to say that Alexander was a nice guy. Like, he could be nice at times, but at other times, he could be very evil and very ruthless and pretty much without mercy. For example, he had a very hard time accepting people's opinions when they were different than his. So much so that if you had a different opinion than him on a sensitive subject, he would have you killed for it. City after city, Alexander defeated the Persian armies, and because he spent so much time in Persian territory, over time he was influenced with Persian culture and the Persian ideologies. His ego was through the roof, and he wanted to be considered and called the King of Kings, a title that was given to the ultimate king in Persia. And I mean, this makes sense, right? Like, I hope that by now you know that Alexander was egotistical. I mean, he was calling himself a demigod. He was renaming multiple cities after his name. Of course, when he heard that there was a title called the King of Kings, he was gonna go for it, right? There was no way he was not gonna go for such a big title. Although not everybody was too happy with the way that he was doing things, because he was fundamentally a Greek and he was adopting and following Persian cultures very easily. In fact, some of his troops tried to kill him because of that, but unfortunately they failed and he ended up killing them instead. His troops just did not see the value of being open-minded when it comes to culture. But then again, this was the year 300 BC, like nobody was this open-minded. The only people that were really open-minded about these things were like Plato, Aristotle, and Alexander, like that's it. Alexander was also known to drink a lot. He was a young guy and he loved alcohol, and you can obviously imagine that his tolerance for other people's opinions was greatly reduced when he was under the influence. Simply put, if Alexander's drunk and you're there, just agree with him, like just whatever he says, just say, you know what, Alexander, you're right, I agree with you, because if you have a difference of opinion and Alexander is drunk, you are going to get killed, no doubt about it. In the following years, Alexander kept on conquering, he kept on winning, and he eventually reached India successfully. But like all stories, like all people, nothing is forever, something was bound to happen and something was going to kill Alexander. Alexander's death comes from something that we as humans are not immune to, like we're all subject to, and that's disease. It is believed that he may have got malaria, possibly due to his excessive drinking. One of the accounts of his death says that he was drinking heavily with friends one night. The following day he got a big fever, and that fever lasted way too long, and unfortunately 10 days later he died of that fever. Alexander was only 32 years old when he died, and remember, he took over his father's army at 18 years old, so that's 14 years. In 14 years he created and expanded a massive empire that was arguably the biggest for its time. He won many battles, he defeated many Persians, he made the king flee many times, all that in just a decade and a half. That's actually not bad for a young general. Having expanded his empire so much in the east, the influence of the Greeks and the Greek culture began to be spread in different parts of the world. It's a process that we call Hellenization, and in fact it's the reason why today we have many things that have their roots traced back to ancient Greece. In fact, you should actually go research it on your own. It's very interesting, this whole concept of Hellenization. I've gone ahead and put some links for you in the description where you can start. So that was a brief history lesson on Alexander the Great. I really hope that you've enjoyed this video, and if you did, please leave it a big like. Make sure to subscribe, make sure to hit the notification bell, join Team Knowledge, and be notified whenever a new video comes out. I would recommend that you go out and research this topic more on your own, because there's a lot more to it that I haven't talked about here, and I've actually done that on purpose. I do these shows a little limited so that you guys get interested in the subject and want to go out and research it more on your own. And now it's time for questions. What do you think about Alexander? Are you impressed with his conquest? Are you impressed with the fact that he was able to do so much in such little time? And finally, what do you think would have happened if he hadn't died so young? Could the world be different? Please do let me know. I would love to read and answer all of your comments. And if you do leave a comment, you might get featured next week's video as a fan of the week. With that being said, my name has been Cosden. You can follow me on social media. The links will be in the description. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I will see you all next week.